pyramid scheme. If you have 300,000 net migration into the country every year, then you have 300,000 people who now have access to our health services who have not paid for them. Of course, they will stay, and I'm sure eventually they will start paying taxes. But then the next year, you have another 300,000 people who come in who have not paid into the system. This is a drain on you, the taxpayer. This cannot be allowed to go on. It is unsustainable. Milton Friedman is actually correct in this regard. You can have social services or you can have open borders, but you cannot have both, as one will destroy the other. So we have to make a choice. Do we have unlimited mass immigration or do we have social services? I land on the side of social services, as does UKIP. Point number 3, social care and mental health in England. There is an increasing proportion of older people in the population and they have care issues that are not being addressed. They wish to increase this by £2 billion per year in order to make sure that none of our older or unhealthy people go without treatment. I think that's very fair. That leads into the welfare and disability policy in England, which is very much the same. They intend to end the ATOS-style work capability assessments. Now, I'm sure you've seen some wonderful reporting on these where people who have cancer and are literally at death's door are deemed fit to work, because UKIP is not the Conservative Party. We are not the party of austerity. We're a party who actually care about the people of this country. The 5th point is immigration. And this really does bleed into all other points, because most of the problems that we're having are because of a lack of control of people coming into this country. They say mass uncontrolled immigration has been extremely damaging to Britain. We have imported cheap labour by the million. This not only exploits migrants but depresses wages and living standards for those at the bottom end of the economic scale, drives up property prices and rental costs. This is all true. This is inarguably logically consistent. There is no way that you can increase the amount of competition for low-skilled jobs without making it more difficult for the people in this country who are already trying to get those low-skilled jobs. A few years ago, there was a study done by the Bank of England that confirmed this. Since the Brexit referendum, something like 150,000 Eastern Europeans have gone back to their countries. And what's happened? We are now at the lowest rate of unemployment since 1975, and every week, we learned a couple of days ago, wages are rising by 3.5% per week. This is not good for major corporations. This is not good for the business-owning class of the country, the international types, who think, well, all of the cheap labour in the world is good for us because that's less for the major cost for any business. However, it is good for the regular working person. That's more money in your pocket. It also leads on to the housing issue. The UK does not have a housing problem, as they put it, and very well, I think. It has a demand problem. And we learned the other day, it's 2 days ago in the Daily Mail, I hate to cite the Daily Mail, but I think they are accurate on this case, that there are going to be another 4 million houses built in this country in the next 20 years. Again, it's not that there is a lack of houses, it is a ridiculously increased demand because of mass immigration. Which is what they say. Simply, the housing supply cannot keep up with demand. We cannot stabilise the housing problem until we have controlled immigration. And that's true. And they'll say, well, we've got vast tracts of land that we could build houses on. But why should we? Why should we be housing other people from other countries at the expense of our green and pleasant land? Why? What do we owe these people? Why should it be us doing this? Why should the business class, the ownership class of this country, put this burden upon you, the regular taxpayer? It's not fair. It's not fair to ask you to do this. It's not fair to ask you to shoulder the burden of their desire to save the world. They can't do it. You can't do it. It's not fair. It's unsustainable and it cannot go on. Point 7 is education and training, and point 8 is transport. I'm going to be honest, I'm no expert on these subjects, but I mean, I can't critique what they've said, but it seems fairly sensible and reasonable to me. One of the things that I find interesting that they mentioned in the NHS part is that they wish to start training our doctors British people to be British doctors. I think this is a very sensible state of affairs. What they would like to do is waive student fees for people who become doctors and nurses in exchange for a guarantee of 5 years working at the NHS. I think that's a fair deal. I think that it makes sense that we can train our own doctors and nurses, because there is actually a negative consequence of headhunting them from the third world. If you say, ask an Indian doctor to come over, we'll pay him twice as much as what he can earn in India, he's going to come. He's deeply incentivized to come. Why would he not? But this is a form of neo-colonialism, because we did not pay for this doctor to become a doctor. People in India did. They raised him, they nurtured him, they sent him to school, all at their own expense, and then we steal them. We get them to come here to work for us, which again is putting our own people out of work, and it's also depriving India of their much needed human capital. These countries are struggling to develop, and us stealing their best and brightest is not doing them any favors. I believe that this is an irresponsible thing that our country is doing, not just for our own people, but for Indian people as well. Not only are we taking their skilled workers, we are pulling up the ladder for our own working classes and making it more difficult for them to get out of their situation. The next step is foreign affairs and overseas aid. Post-Brexit, Britain's foreign policy will no longer be linked to the EU's common security and defence policy, which would inevitably involve us in the EU's planned armed forces. Now, much to the chagrin of every Remainer in the country, yes, there will be an EU army. Instead of denying that this army is going to exist, now they've got to the point where they're saying, well, why is that bad? Do I have to explain why it's bad that we let a German-controlled European superstate that is unaccountable to the demos have its own army? Do I have to explain this? I think not. Needless to say, UKIP's foreign policy is going to be entirely focused on whether it is within Britain's interests to get involved, with an eye to not getting involved if we do not need to. As in, what is good for the country, not what is good for the international class. When it comes to defence and security, UKIP obviously want to meet our 2% GDP commitment to NATO, because we are still a member of NATO, again rendering the European Union obsolete in the arguments of defence. When it comes to veterans issues, again, I'm no expert on this, but they indeed do plan to make sure that our veterans are well looked after, something that I don't think you can expect from Labour or the Conservatives. Police and criminal justice. Now, this is where I'm actually particularly interested, because I've been noticing a politicisation of the institutions of this country. Now, I'm sure you may not be aware, but the police in this country were founded on Peel's 9 principles. Now, this was a set of principles to make sure that the police in this country police by consent. We are the only country, as I'm aware, that actually has this. And it is why our police are considered to be so patient and tolerant and gentle, because we know that they are there for our good, and it is our duty to cooperate them if they have an issue with us. This can only be achieved if we can guarantee the political neutrality of the police. Now, you may well have seen that there are police, and I believe it's Bedfordshire, who have pride flags painted on their police cars. Now, I'm completely in support of the issues that the pride movement is trying to raise. I'm an atheist. I have no moral objection to gay marriage or homosexuality or anything of the sort. However, I do have an objection to the police taking a stance on it, because whether you agree with it or not, it is a political stance, as you can see by the Muslim mums in Birmingham who are actively campaigning against this issue. Now, I don't agree with them. I think that they're wrong, but this is political, and the police and all of our other institutions should have no public opinion on it. That's what impartiality is. And so UKIP wish to do a root and branch review of policing with a royal commission, which will establish what is actually required to ensure the police can deliver the service that they deliver efficiently, effectively, and impartially. Next point is the prison service. Our prison service is in disarray and close to meltdown. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't realise, and this is something that Tommy Robinson had been talking about for quite some time. There is a huge problem with gangs in prisons. This has to be addressed, but no one wants to, because suddenly the issue of Islamophobia is raised, which, if you were a Labour Party supporter, you know, they are trying to define as expressions of Muslimness. which is so vague, I can hardly imagine under what criteria I would even be allowed to critique ISIS under that definition. It is, of course, in their opinion, a form of racism, which is nonsense. It is an ideology, not a race. It is something that people can and do willingly leave, except those people are often attacked by their own communities. The prisons are a breeding ground for this kind of radicalization because in prisons you have gangs, and a lot of these gangs require you to essentially join an ideology. There are obviously white supremacist gangs in prison. There are Islamist gangs in prison. And if you want to remain safe in these prisons, that's often what you have to do. The problem is that the network
he's so mad.
do not stay in these prisons. When these people leave prison, these people are now
He's
part
so
of these
mad.
networks, and it is a path to radicalism. It's very difficult to talk about this. There are many people who try and shut you down for talking about this. Frankly, I'm surprised there aren't a bunch of black-clad communists attacking people left, right, and center. But these are the facts. These are the difficult issues we have to look in the face. And I think it is incumbent on the sensible, regular, liberal-minded people to not sweep these under the rug just because it would make them feel better. Out of sight, out of mind is not going to get us through all of this. We have to start tackling this head on. We have to start abandoning the culture of public shaming because, once again, that is a method of coercion. It is not right that a Twitter mob can dictate your life when you talk about a difficult issue. Point 14 is agriculture. Post-Brexit, the UK will be free of the costs and impositions of the Common Agricultural Policy. We will move to a system that subsidises large landowners, from a system, that subsidises large landowners to one that supports food producers and environmental protection. Again, not my specialist subject, but I see nothing to object to there. That's a fine idea. Can we support the small local farmers at the expense of international agriculture? People like Monsanto? I think we should. I think, in fact, it should be the duty of the government to protect these people. Point 15 is the fisheries. Now, I'm sure you're aware that the European Union has destroyed British fisheries, and you can go anywhere in the southwest, a place that was famous for it, and see the damage. UKIP wants the total withdrawal from the EU's common fisheries policy without the need for a transition period when we leave the EU. That's a very sensible thing to do because that would allow us to literally just send the boats out and actually fish in our own waters, the 200-mile exclusion zone that is British sovereign naval territory, ocean territory. This is currently being fished in by the French
You're
and Spanish.
a fucking scumbag.
We can't do this ourselves, but they can. We're apparently allowed to fish scallops in French waters until French fishing vessels come out and actually attack English fishing vessels, which is something that happened very recently. We are not being treated fairly in this regard. We are an island nation. We should be able to fish in our own waters. And it's just against common sense to think that we can't. It's ridiculous. Point 16 is the economy and trade. Britain's trade policy has been under the control of the European Union since we joined in 1973. Our businesses have been obliged to obey EU legislation even when they do not export to the EU. And again, I speak to the tyrannical nature of the European Union here. Why should businesses that do no business with the European Union be bound by regulations from them? Leaving the EU will free Britain to pursue its own trade and commercial policies with enormous opportunity for increased trade and employment. Post-Brexit, they wish that Britain will gain a seat on the World Trade Organization as an independent country and be free to decide our own trade policy and negotiate trade agreements, where appropriate, with other countries. Now, I can't just sit here and give you a list, although Donald Trump does keep offering us an amazing trade deal by his own rhetoric. Of course, how amazing that is stands to be decided, but there are countries outside of the European Union, in fact, most countries are outside of the European Union, who would like to trade with us. Point 17 is industry. Again, not one of my strong suits on that one, I'm afraid, so I'm just going to skip over it, but obviously UKIP wishes to revive British industry where possible. The only point that I actually disagree with is under the energy section, which is point 18. The UK needs a mix of energy sources comprising nuclear, conventional and renewable. Brexit will allow the UK to set its own future energy policy with lower prices and more secure supplies. Now, one part, and this is the only part that I found myself actively objecting to. UKIP would seek to rejuvenate the UK's coal industry wherever that's possible. Now, I don't know why that's in there. I believe it's trying to speak to the working class communities in the north who used coal as a means of their livelihood. Now, I think that time has passed. I think that's not something we can rejuvenate. And I think it'd be more responsible for us to move to nuclear, but I don't get to write the manifestos. Point 19 is the environment. And I like the way that this is phrased very much, because I don't know anything about anthropogenic climate change. I don't know anything about the subject. I know you do, chap. It's not my subject, but I think that there is an important distinction that they make here that actually allows us to approach the topic without having to commit to any particular form of dogma. Can you get me a glass bottle? Where? Okay, well, I couldn't find one when I needed a drink. Sorry, buddy. But I'm not an environmental activist. I just think it's a good idea. All right? I'm not an environmental activist. I just think it's a good idea. Anyway, the environment. We should separate the dogma of anthropogenic, which is man-made climate change, from environmentalism itself, which is care and protection for the environment. Now, I think that's a great idea. And I like the fact that the guy raised the issue about the bottles, because I don't like plastic bottles. I don't like plastic bags, and I don't like plastic straws. I'm aware that there is a problem that these things do not break down, and when they do, they introduce microplastics into the environment. This is a fairly simple, fairly easy solution, is just to ban them. Now, I'm not a big fan of state intervention, but I think in this regard, it's not too much to ask. I think it's actually fairly reasonable, and I think that we could get it done fairly easily. Small businesses, and this is where I'm very concerned, because I'm a small business owner. Now, I was just talking to our communist friends over there, and while saying, I'm not joking, the councillor said to me that he would like to seize the means of production. It's not going to last 20 years, love. It's not going to live 20 years. And there's going to be chaos when it goes down in flames. Look at Paris at the moment. Germany's going into a recession. Italy is being led by anti-European parties. The second largest contributor is leaving. The project is failing. The project is failing.
You are the ruin of Britain.
I would love to be able to take credit for ruining your project, but unfortunately I'm not that important.
I have no project. I am a pensioner.
But you support the European
for
Union.
British jobs. I am a European.
Well, what about our fishing jobs? The European Union ruined those. We're an island. Shouldn't we have those back? Why should the Spanish fish in our waters?
I can understand the grievances of fishermen. I agree. Your waters should be fished by yourself. Europe is not perfect.
No, it's destroying our jobs. In fact, it's run terribly.
Who destroyed?
Did you not hear Guy Verhofstadt staffers calling us a colony?
Honda and Nissan moved out of England. Who destroyed that?
Do you know why? Do you know why? Do you know why Honda are leaving? Honda are leaving Europe entirely. They are moving back to Japan. It's nothing to do with Brexit, and what it is to do with is the reduction of use in diesel, because people are becoming aware of the issue of particulates that diesel fuel causes. It is actually polluting the environment, and people, as informed consumers, are making sensible decisions, and that's affecting Honda. It's nothing to do with Brexit.
Yeah, and how do you replace...
Well, hang on. Don't just move on from that. Do you accept that you were wrong on that issue?
No, I don't accept that.
Why?
No.
That's what Honda themselves said. That was their statement. I live in Swindon,
okay.
where the plant is.
Okay,
I paid very close attention to this. They stated we're leaving Europe.
Okay, people have to give reasons, but the real reason is...
No, the real reason is not this.
England leaves Europe, they are no longer attractive to the work market.
That's not true at all, because we're going to reduce our taxes on businesses and get foreign investment in. In fact, we're going to undermine the European Union and take it down as quickly as possible. It is a tyrannical organization run by unaccountable people and funded by the Germans. Yes, we're going to bring it down. To hell with the European Union. It's the Fourth Reich.
What gives you the right to say
Right.
Germany is not a democracy?
I didn't say Germany wasn't a democracy, but I
You
would have
said
the no.
that
I said the
Third
European
Reich
Union.
was a murderous dictatorship.
I didn't say that, but it was.
It was. It is a fact.
That's
but
true,
you
yeah.
are now saying the Fourth Reich. Germany is not the Fourth Reich.
No, the European Union is the Fourth Reich. Germany just funds it.
No, that is complete rubbish.
I don't think
That
it
is
is.
complete
I don't
rubbish.
think it is. I think the euro itself is a political project, not an economic one, to take over Europe through the back door. The Germans simply can't help themselves in this regard, and I do not wish to be dominated by Germany.
No, you are not dominated by Germany. Who gave you that idea?
Who's paying for all of this?
We have taken in 1.4
goddamn fundamentalist version of Islam themselves. So if they put cameras in their mosques, well, maybe we should start paying attention to what happens in our mosques. Because at the moment, half of the mosques in this country, 46%, everyone thinks that Saudi mosques are the problem in this country. They're not. They're the problem in other countries. In our country, it's Deobandi Islam. Now, that's a form of Islam that was founded to deliberately oppose British imperialism and liberalism, because they believed that liberalism was corrupting Islam. This was founded in a town in North.
Yeah, I understand how the gadgets and guards get the most amount of kills. I'm having the most amount of fun here. I need more health. I keep dying. And drop a spit. Yeah, run into that wall, bitch. There's so many bodies in here. gay. Just gonna mind control you a little bit. Run away. I spared the priests. Oops. What are you doing? Go away. Get the fuck out of here.
is, I tell you, first of all, the level of censorship is continuing to get intense. But the interview that Anderson Cooper did with Facebook is a bizarre, like they want Facebook to personally censor what they deem unacceptable. And this is one of the first times we've seen clear evidence criticism of politicians. That's like one step away from saying censor videos that guy make, or what's that guy, Carpe, Darktum or something? I'm probably not pronouncing that right. Yo! Keep it real. Yo! Hurry back! Yo! Be good. Time is money, friend. Keep it real. radio class that says Covington Kid's video wasn't a selectively edited video. Right, and they ran with that. They ran with So when we do it, it's okay.
This is the conversation. The conversation is not about people believing this video. It's that they are discussing the fact that it was manipulated, and that's the conversation that people should be having.
You have no problem removing 3.39 billion fake Facebook accounts from October through March. So why is it okay for you to remove fake Facebook accounts, but it's not okay to remove a clearly fake video?
This is actually a good question as far as consistency. I don't think they should be either. I mean, as far as people to give up their identity, that's bullshit. It should be anonymous posting on the internet.
Because when we look at our community standards, those are about keeping the community safe.
How are fake
yes,
Facebook
fake accounts
accounts
do engage. Fake accounts, we do see that fake accounts engage in safety violations more than accounts that are real.
3.39
And not
billion of them
shockingly, fake
are
accounts.
promoting violence?
That's
I mean,
a good
It's
point.
a fundamental. No, that's not what I said. It's a fundamental rule when you come to Facebook, you have to use your real identity. That's always been our rule. And we do see that accounts that are fake are engaged in to distribute misinformation or fake news. And so part of our effort to combat misinformation, it's not just about working with third-party fact checkers. When we remove fake accounts, we are also reducing the chance that these accounts would be sharing misinformation. And I would point out that this is working.
If you have the scale, though, to be able to remove over the course of 6 months 3.39 billion fake accounts, and you have the scale to remove, I think you ID'd 80 in that 6-month period, 83% of accounts that or comments that were selling drugs or doing something illegal or promoting something illegal. You certainly have the scale to decide something that you know is clearly fake. It's not even a question. I guess I still just don't logically understand. I understand it's a big business to get into of trying to figure out what's true or not, but you're making money by being in the news business, and you can't do it well. Should you just get out of the news business?
Look, I reject the notion that we're not doing a lot to counter misinformation.
No, I didn't say you're not doing a lot. I'm just saying if you are in this particular case spreading and allowing the spread of a clearly false you're in the news business. There's a responsibility that comes with that, and this isn't even a question.
Now, here's the deal. He is right about that because they are in the news business, and this is why I argue they should absolutely lose their Section 230 protection. They've decided to be in the news business. They've decided to become publishers, so they should absolutely lose the protection. They shouldn't be that. They should